I'm Shivani Gupta. I'm obsessed with small to medium businesses growing. As business owners, we take so much risk and we want to make sure it's worth it. I believe one of the best presents you can give yourself as a business owner is to be able to learn how to scale your people, your profit, and your processes. Hello and welcome to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm Shivani Gupta and I'm your host. And I really look forward to sharing with you and talking a bit about feedback. Feedback, when everybody says, can I give you feedback? We have this horrific reaction to it most of the time, because most of the time we think it's not going to be great. And the reason of that is because we live in a culture these days where positive feedback is not actually often in our culture. So when somebody says we want to give feedback, at best we think they're going to give us a bit of a sandwich, which is here's the positive, here's what I really wanted to talk to you about in the middle of the sandwich, and then finish off with the positive that we've all heard about, this being sandwiched in terms of feedback. Or they're going to tell us some things that we're doing wrong and what we need to do. So I wanted to just dive into this topic with you over the next few minutes in this podcast. The first thing is I want to define feedback, right? When I look at, my technical days and a long time ago in another life, it feels like now that I used to be an engineer, there was a feedback loop. So you did something that took an action and then that would actually feed that back. So you knew that when you change one or two variables, there would be a feedback loop in there. So when it comes to feedback, it's a similar thing. So one of the things we want to do is we want to get some data. We want that feedback to come back so that we can go back and change the loop. We can change our behavior, we can change our thinking, or we can reset something that is going to help us become better in the future. So if it's feedback on a program, then we want that program to improve. If it's feedback on a person, then we want that person's output or productivity or behavior to improve. So that's the whole point of actually getting feedback, is the reaction from that feedback. And then what we want to be able to do it is to be able to improve that. Most of the time we're talking about this podcast being for Grow Your Business and for SME owners, is really employee performance feedback, or there may be feedback from the employees to you as a business owner. And again, people talk about this notion of feedback, negative feedback, positive feedback, constructive feedback. Probably the best way and the best word is constructive, because the word constructive means when we dissect it is that we are constructing something. So as a result of this feedback, I'm actually trying to construct something. Now, let's talk about that a little bit more. When we're doing constructive feedback, one of the things that we want to do is we want to highlight an area for improvement, highlight whether it's communication, whether it's the way things are being managed. And what you want to do is give them also some encouragement in that. So it's not hey, here's some constructive feedback, you didn't do such and such and such. What you want to do is kind of say, these are all the things that you're doing, but I just want to shine a light and give you some feedback on this particular part. And I think that if we did this better, these are some of the great things that can come out of that. So when does feedback become really important? Well, a lot of people think feedback is important, again, when some things are not going very well. But I believe that feedback is actually really important to create a cohesive and a performance-based culture. And what do I mean by that? Well, when people get used to in a culture of receiving really positive feedback, then they also get into ways that they will be much more open to receiving constructive feedback. Now, Stephen Covey and a number of different people around the world that have done research, they talk about this 4-to-1 ratio. We actually want 4 types of positive feedback before people have the right to give us some constructive feedback. And why 4-to-1? Well, because we need to be able to, literally look at it as a bank deposit. And that if you deposit $4, well, then you'll be able to take $1 out. So it's not the same financial system where you can take $4 out on a debit card, but feedback works in a 4-to-1 ratio. The other is that there's a lot of studies that are showing the fact that employees who get daily to weekly feedback from their manager are going to be 3 times more engaged. I want to repeat that. Employees that get daily to weekly feedback from their direct manager are 3 times, 300%, 3 times more likely to be engaged. So if you're trying to engage your employees, which is an issue for all of us as SME owners, one of the things is we don't have to spend lots and lots of money on a lot of initiatives around here. We really want to use feedback as the main mechanism to be able to engage them and get their performance higher. The other thing is people, when they actually get feedback, are much more likely to pass it on. So when they receive really good positive feedback in that 4-to-1 ratio, they not only they feel like that you've already given them some bank deposits. So when you want to withdraw $1, it's not a big deal. You know, if there's $200 sitting in that bank and you need to withdraw $4 or $5, it's not a big deal. Whereas if you've got no money, then you know financially you can't take that money out. So by giving lots of positive feedback and creating that culture, they also are able to pass that on. Feedback also encourages then the turnover in your business to be lower. Some companies and the research that they've done globally talk about the fact that it can be the turnover will reduce as high as 15%. Now, even if it improves by 3%, 4%, that's a lot of money depending on what type of business you run and how many employees that you have. And Microsoft, which is being a big global company, one of the things that they found is that their companies, when they use feedback to drive change, are actually 90% more satisfied and more engaged than some of the other companies. So there's a lot of linkages into being able to improve performance and being able to do that. Now, sometimes people get very anxious about giving feedback, which is very normal. And in terms of how do I actually give feedback? So, you know, yes, sometimes when I'm a bit upset, I might want to just speak my mind. I want to pass my opinions, pass my criticisms across and be able to do that. But really, that's not often the answer in terms of how to do that. So there's some really important, I guess, guidelines, frameworks, boundaries, whichever words you want to implement to be able to give feedback. And I want to go through some of these steps with you. The first one is you want to actually just always focus from a business perspective on their professional stuff. What are we actually looking for feedback? Don't go to personal things. Don't make even positive comments or other comments, like all about their personal life. Try and actually stay that and stick to the work-related things and don't drag personalities and personal stuff in there. The second is to get very specific. In fact, this should probably be the number one, because when we are not specific, people go, so for example, if you've had an amazing thing that they've done, don't go, oh, that was a great meeting. Get specific about it. The way that you handled that criticism in that meeting was amazing. I thought that was fantastic. So you get very, very specific. When you want to give constructive feedback, it is the same. Don't just look at the broad brush of going, look, you never listen, or this doesn't work, or that doesn't happen. Look, I just thought that when the client was speaking about that, I just felt that you interrupted them a couple of times. And I think that that can come across as the fact that we weren't really listening to them. So whether it's a positive or a constructive, you want to make sure that it's very, very specific, and you want to be able to do that. There was something that I heard many years ago, and it says, praise publicly, scold privately. And my grandfather, who rest in peace, you know, used to talk about a silent slap, right? We don't use the word slap with our employees, but he used to say, you know, whatever you want to say, you always do that silently. So other people, they don't get embarrassed in front of other people, but they know that their behavior hasn't been right. Praise publicly, you know, in front of team meetings, letting people know, look, John, Josie did this amazing stuff, and we want to be able to let them know that, you know, congratulations to them, let them know what it is. And also, but if you need to have that constructive conversation, don't do a constructive conversation in a team meeting with everybody else around. That is unlikely for them to be open-minded, even if you've got enough bank deposits there, to be able to withdraw that money and withdraw that feedback from them in terms of what they do. Also give your freedom, you know, give your feedback freely. You know, I used to go, no, I'll save that for special occasions. No, when there's great things happening, keep giving feedback to people on what they're doing well. There's a saying that you want to catch people doing well, and you want to make sure that it becomes a routine, it becomes a habit, it becomes something that the people in your culture really, really say. And the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about was this whole notion of growth mindset. And when we have a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset, we become very aware of the words that we're using. We become very aware of the narrative that we're using. And what we want to do is make sure when we have that growth mindset, we actually become very clear about the feedback we want to give. We almost want to prepare. I always like preparing, whether it's 30 seconds, what's the feedback? Is it specific? Am I making sure that if it's, if I can do it more publicly, and if it's a constructive feedback, where do I do that? And what do I organize to be able to do that? And so making sure that we do that with a growth mindset. I hope that this helped you, and I hope that it given you some ideas in terms of how you can incorporate this into giving feedback. It is so important. Look at the bottom line results as a result of creating a culture that's got a lot more feedback in it. Don't sandwich people, give them feedback openly, freely, and I hope that you are able to implement some of that in your business. Thanks for tuning in. Always would appreciate if you would subscribe, and would really love if you would take 30 to 40 seconds to rate this on the Apple podcast. Thank you so much. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I hope you got one idea that you can think about or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple podcast to rate and review this podcast.